Welcome to TEIU OpenCourseWare. This is Design Thinking 101, Lecture 1, What is Design Thinking? Over the next few minutes, we'll look at where this framework came from, what it actually is, and why it's become one of the most widely used problem-solving approaches in the world. Here's a quick look at where we're headed across the full course. We'll start here with an introduction, then spend one lecture on each of the 5 core stages: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test, before bringing it all together in the final lecture with a real case study. Today's focus is the big picture, what design thinking is and why it matters. Let's start with a hard truth. Most teams, when given a problem, skip straight to solutions. They sit in a boardroom, armed with last quarter's data and their own assumptions, and start building. The result? They solve the wrong problem brilliantly. Design thinking exists precisely because of this failure mode. It flips the process. You start with people, not with solutions. So what exactly is design thinking? At its core, it's a human-centered approach to solving complex, ambiguous problems. Notice what comes first: people, not the brief, not the data, not the spec. You go out, you observe, you listen, and only then do you define what the real problem is. The process then alternates between understanding and building. You don't just research once and then build, you cycle between the two. And crucially, it embraces failure as information. A rough prototype that fails in day 2 saves months of wasted development. This isn't just for designers, it's been applied by doctors, engineers, teachers, and executives worldwide. I want to share a quote that captures the spirit of design thinking better than any definition. Tim Brown, CEO of Ideate, the firm most associated with spreading this framework, said, "Design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success." 3 things in tension: people, technology, and business. Design thinking is the method for balancing all 3. Before we go further, let's clear up some common misconceptions that stop people from taking design thinking seriously. First, it is not just brainstorming. Brainstorming is one tool inside a much larger, research-grounded process. Second, it's not only for designers. Some of the most powerful applications have been in healthcare, education, and government. Third, it is not a linear checklist. You don't complete step 1 and move on forever. You loop back constantly as you learn new things. And finally, it's not a magic wand. It improves your odds of solving the right problem well, but it doesn't guarantee results. Where did this framework come from? It wasn't invented in a single moment, it evolved over decades of practice. In the 1960s and 70s, researchers in engineering and industrial design began formalizing how great designers actually think. In the 1990s, IDEO popularized it as a business methodology. The 2000s brought it to a much wider audience when Stanford's D.Dot School opened design thinking to non-designers across every discipline. Then in the 2010s, Google Ventures formalized the design sprint, a compressed 5-day version of the process. Today, it's used by organizations in every industry across more than 200 countries. The framework is organized into 5 stages. Empathize, where you conduct deep research with real users. Define, where you synthesize that research into a sharp, actionable problem statement. Ideate, where you generate a large volume of bold, diverse ideas. Prototype, where you build quick, rough versions of your best ideas to make them tangible. And test, where you put those prototypes in front of real users and learn. These 5 stages are not a recipe you follow once. They're a lens you move through repeatedly. This is probably the most important thing to understand about the process: it is not linear. Most people, when they first see the 5 stages, assume you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, done. That's not how it works. You might start prototyping and discover your problem definition was wrong, so you loop back to define. You might test with users and find an entirely new empathy gap you hadn't seen, so you loop back to empathize. The stages are a compass, not a checklist. And that flexibility is a feature, not a bug. Design thinking has moved well beyond the design studio. 87% of Fortune 100 companies now apply design thinking methods in their product or service teams. McKinsey's Design Index found that top quartile design mature firms outperform their industry peers by 5 times on returns. And Stanford D. School alumni are now working in over 200 countries, carrying this methodology into healthcare, policy, education, and more. This is not a niche skill, it's becoming a core professional competency. Design thinking doesn't exist in isolation, it complements other frameworks rather than replacing them. Compare it to Lean Startup. Lean's build measure learn loop is powerful for iteration, but design thinking can replace the build step with cheap paper prototypes, so you learn before you invest in code. Compare it to Agile. Agile is excellent at delivering software in short sprints, but it needs design thinking upstream to answer the harder question, what should we build at all? And systems thinking maps how all the parts of a complex system connect, while design thinking zooms in on one person's lived experience within that system. Each method fills a gap the others leave. The framework is only half the story. The mindset is the other half, and without it, the stages are just a checklist. There are 4 core attitudes that make design thinking work. Human-centered means you start every project by talking to real people, not relying on assumptions. Bias toward action means a rough prototype on a Tuesday teaches you more than a perfect PowerPoint on Friday. Radical collaboration means deliberately bringing together people with different expertise, backgrounds, and perspectives, because diverse teams see more blind spots. And embracing ambiguity means you resist the urge to jump to solutions before you understand the problem. Not knowing is your starting point, not your failure. By the time you finish this course, you'll have a concrete set of skills. You'll know how to research users deeply, not just surveys, but real observation and conversation. You'll be able to frame a sharp, specific problem statement that aligns your team. You'll have practiced generating 50 or more ideas before selecting one. And you'll know how to build and test a prototype in a day. Those are real, transferable skills you can apply next week. Let's close with 3 things to carry forward. Design thinking starts with people, not assumptions, not specifications, not data. The 5 stages are non-linear, expect to loop back, and treat that as progress, not failure. And the mindset is half the method. Curiosity and a willingness to not know are just as important as the tools themselves. We'll go much deeper into each of these in the lectures ahead. Before we move on, here are 3 questions to sit with. First, think of a problem you tried to solve without talking to real users. What would have changed if you had? Second, is design thinking only for designers, or can anyone apply it? What makes it accessible? And third, which of the 5 stages do you think gets skipped most often in real projects, and why? There are no wrong answers here. The point is to connect the framework to your own experience.